My name is Mark, and my life was turned upside down in an instant. I always saw myself as just another ordinary guy, an average American enjoying a simple life in the suburbs. My wife Lisa and I had been married for nearly 15 years. We resided in a cozy house in a tranquil neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. Our home was the quintessential suburban dream: a white picket fence, a lush green lawn, and a snug backyard where we often hosted barbecues for our friends and neighbors. Lisa was a lively woman. She was stunning, with fiery red hair that matched her vibrant personality. She was charismatic, outgoing, and always the center of attention at any gathering. She worked as a marketing director at a large company downtown, a role that occasionally required her to travel. Her career was crucial to her, and I always supported her aspirations. I worked as a software developer at a tech firm, which allowed me to work from home most days. This flexibility helped me manage household chores and support Lisa's busy schedule. We had decided early in our marriage not to have children, enjoying the freedom to travel whenever we pleased. On the surface, our life seemed perfect. We were the couple everyone admired, always appearing happy and deeply in love. But, as I would soon discover, appearances can be deceiving. Recently, there had been subtle changes in Lisa's behavior that puzzled me. She seemed distant, often glued to her phone, and her business trips had become more frequent. I brushed off my suspicions, convincing myself it was just work-related stress. After all, I trusted her completely. We had always been open and honest with each other, or so I believed. Our story begins on what seemed like any other Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, brewing my second cup of coffee, while Lisa was in the living room packing for another business trip. She seemed preoccupied, her responses to my attempts at conversation short and distracted. I chalked her mood up to work stress, as usual. Little did I know that this trip would be the catalyst that would unravel the tangled web of lies and betrayal that had taken over our marriage. Watching her leave that morning, dragging her suitcase behind her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. My gut told me this trip was different, that there was more to her frequent travels than she was letting on. But for the sake of our marriage and my own peace of mind, I pushed those thoughts aside, hoping everything would be fine. I had no idea my world was about to be turned on its head, that the woman I loved and trusted was hiding a secret that would shatter the very foundation of our relationship. This is the story of how I discovered my wife's infidelity, the betrayal that ensued, and the unexpected journey of healing and self-discovery that followed. The quiet anxiety that had been building inside me for weeks finally began to overflow after Lisa left on her latest business trip. There were too many little things that didn't add up: her frequent trips, the way she guarded her phone like it was gold, and the sudden unexplained expenses on our credit cards. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee long gone cold, replaying the events of the past weeks in my mind. Lisa had always been busy with work, but lately it felt like she was more absent than present. She would come home late, exhausted and irritable, and our conversations had become superficial, almost forced. Then there was the way she had become increasingly secretive with her phone. She used to leave it lying around the house, but now it was always within reach, never out of her sight. I couldn't recall the last time I saw her without it in her hand or pocket. And then there were the business trips. They had become more frequent, often with little or no notice. I used to enjoy those few days of solitude, but now they filled me with dread. Every time she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was running away from something or someone. I decided to take a closer look at her recent trips. I opened our shared calendar and noted down the dates and locations of her business trips over the past few months. It didn't take long to see a pattern. She was traveling to the same cities, often staying at the same hotels. It was too consistent to be a coincidence. One evening, after Lisa had gone to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. I quietly got out of bed and went to the living room. I picked up her laptop, which she often left on the coffee table, and turned it on. My hands trembled as I sifted through her emails, feeling guilty for invading her privacy. But the need to know the truth outweighed my conscience. It didn't take long to find something suspicious. Among the mundane work emails and newsletters were messages from someone named Tom. The emails were cleverly disguised as work-related, but between the lines it was clear there was more. The messages were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and innuendos. My heart pounded harder with each email I read, each one a dagger to my heart. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to act normal while my thoughts swirled with suspicion and doubt. Lisa continued her routine, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't confront her without solid proof, but I also couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. One evening, Lisa mentioned she had to go to a work dinner. It wasn't unusual, but something about the way she said it sent chills down my spine. She avoided eye contact and spoke hesitantly, as if hiding something. My intuition told me this was my chance to find out what was really going on. After Lisa left, I waited a few minutes, grabbed my keys, and set out to follow her. She had mentioned the restaurant during dinner, so I knew where she was headed. I drove there, parking a few blocks away to keep my car out of sight. My heart pounded as I walked to the restaurant, trying to stay hidden. I positioned myself outside, peering through the large windows into the dining area. It didn't take long to spot her. She was at a table in the back, laughing and chatting animatedly with a man who could only be Tom. They sat too close for it to be just a professional meeting. My suspicions were confirmed. As I watched them, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. The woman I loved and trusted was betraying me in the most painful way. But I couldn't confront her just yet. I needed more proof, something undeniable. I took a few photos on my phone, capturing the intimate moment between Lisa and Tom. Then I returned to my car, contemplating my next move. The time for confrontation was near, but I needed to be prepared. This was just the beginning of uncovering the truth about my wife's betrayal, and I needed to gather all the pieces before confronting her. Back home, I sat down and began to formulate a plan. I knew I needed to dig deeper to uncover the full truth about Lisa's affair. I was determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter how painful it would be. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we had built together, was unraveling, and I needed to be ready for what came next. I sat in the living room, my thoughts a storm of emotions. I tried to distract myself with the TV, but nothing could pull me away from the thoughts gnawing at my mind. The house felt colder, emptier, knowing what Lisa was doing behind my back. As the hours passed, my anxiety grew. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. Lisa laughed, stumbling, with Tom following behind her. They didn't see me in the dimly lit living room, assuming I was asleep. I remained still, watching as they moved through the house. Lisa's laugh was filled with drunken mirth, and she clung to Tom as they made their way to the living room. "Shh," she whispered loudly. "Mark's probably asleep. We need to be quiet." Tom laughed, pulling her closer. "Don't worry, babe. He's probably already snoring." They began kissing, their hands roaming freely like seasoned lovers. I felt my fists clench, my nails digging into my palms. The sight of my wife in another man's arms in our home was too much to bear. Lisa pushed Tom onto the couch, and they started undressing each other, their movements urgent and unrestrained. My anger grew with each piece of clothing that hit the floor. This was the woman I loved and trusted. The woman I had shared my life with for 15 years, now shamelessly betraying me in our living room. Unable to contain my anger any longer, I stood up, casting a shadow over them. The sound of my footsteps made them freeze. Lisa turned, her eyes widening in shock as she saw me standing there. "Mark," she gasped, scrambling to cover herself with a pillow. Tom jumped up, fumbling to fasten his pants. I can explain," he stammered, his face pale. I didn't give him a chance. I lunged at him, fueled by rage and adrenaline. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling back onto the couch. Lisa screamed, trying to pull me away, but I shoved her aside, focusing all my anger on the man who dared to touch my wife. "Get out!" I roared, delivering another blow to Tom. "Get out of my house!" Tom scrambled to his feet, his face bloody and bruised. He grabbed his clothes, retreating from me with fear in his eyes. I'm going, he cried, stumbling toward the door. I followed him, ensuring he left, then slammed the door behind him. My chest heaved with exertion and rage. I turned back to Lisa, who was sitting on the couch, clutching a pillow to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "How could you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "How could you do this to me, to us?" Lisa sobbed, trying to collect herself. "Mark, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out?" I repeated mockingly. "You brought him into our home, Lisa. You didn't even care if I found out. You thought I was asleep and just went for it. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, looking at her hands. "A few months," she admitted quietly. A few months, I echoed, feeling a punch to my gut. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him, and I didn't see it. I trusted you, Lisa. I loved you. She cried harder, struggling to speak. I was lonely, Mark. You were always busy with work, always occupied. I needed someone, and Tom was there. It just happened. It just happened. I shook my head, unable to comprehend her excuse. No, Lisa. It didn't just happen. You made a choice. You chose to betray me. I stood there, looking at the woman I thought I knew, feeling like my entire life had been a lie. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. I couldn't stand to look at her any longer, couldn't bear to be in the same room. I can't deal with this right now, I said, my voice empty. I need to get out of here. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving Lisa crying on the couch. As I drove aimlessly through the night, the weight of what had happened bore down on me. My marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew, was shattered. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I couldn't go back to the way things were. This was a turning point, and I had to find a way to move forward, no matter how painful it would be. The following days were marked by tense silences and forced politeness. Lisa tried to give me space, but her presence was a constant reminder of her betrayal. I did my best to avoid her, hiding in the guest room and burying myself in work to escape the painful reality. One evening, Lisa knocked on the door of the guest room. "Mark, can we talk?" I sighed, knowing we couldn't avoid this conversation forever. "Come in." She entered hesitantly, her eyes full of sorrow. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how much I've hurt you. I know I can't change what happened, but I want to try to make things right." I looked at her, my heart heavy with mixed emotions. "How do you propose we do that, Lisa? How do we get past something like this?" She sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her hands nervously. "I think we need a therapist, someone who can help us work through this. We've both made mistakes, and we need to find a way to communicate better, to understand each other." "A therapist?" I asked, skepticism in my voice. "You think talking to a stranger can fix this?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But we have to try, don't we? We have to give ourselves a chance." I turned away, wrestling with my thoughts. Part of me wanted to believe therapy could help, that we could somehow rebuild what was broken. But the pain of her betrayal was still fresh, and the thought of sitting in a room and discussing our problems with a stranger seemed unbearable. "Maybe," I finally said. "But it will take more than just talking to someone, Lisa. Trust has to be rebuilt, and right now, I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She nodded, tears filling her eyes once more. "I understand, Mark, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. Please, just give us a chance." I sighed, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "I'll think about it, Lisa. But right now, I need more time." She nodded again, her expression a mix of hope and despair. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, hoping we can find a way through this." As she left the room, I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The road to healing and forgiveness seemed impossibly long and full of uncertainties. But one thing was clear: whatever happened next, our lives would never be the same. The next few weeks were a haze of tension and awkward silences. I continued to avoid Lisa, immersing myself in work and spending long hours away from the house. The nights were the hardest, lying in the guest room, my thoughts swirling around her betrayal. Anger and pain simmered beneath the surface, and I found myself plotting ways to make her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. The idea of revenge took root in my mind, growing stronger with each passing day. Lisa had destroyed our marriage, shattered my trust, and made a mockery of our life together. She needed to understand the depth of my pain, to feel the same agony and betrayal. And Tom, the scoundrel who had stolen my wife, needed to suffer too. One evening, sitting in the guest room, an idea came to me. It was cruel, vengeful, and perfectly suited to the situation. I would hit Lisa where it hurt the most: her job and reputation. She had always been proud of her career, and it was time to shatter that facade. I began gathering all the evidence of her affair: the photos I had taken at the restaurant, the emails I had found on her laptop, and even a few text messages I had managed to recover from her phone. I compiled everything into a neat, devastating package. Then, I created an anonymous email account and sent the evidence to her boss, along with a detailed explanation of her affair with Tom, who also worked at the same company. The next morning, I watched as Lisa left for work, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I felt a twisted satisfaction, imagining the fallout. Her career would be ruined, her reputation tarnished, and Tom would be dragged down with her. That evening, Lisa came home late, her face pale and drawn. She barely looked at me as she walked past, heading straight for the bedroom. I followed her, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. "What happened, Lisa?" I asked, feigning concern. She turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I lost my job, Mark. They fired me." I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be shocked. "Why? What happened?" "Someone sent my boss an email," she said, her voice trembling. "They had photos, emails, everything. They know about Tom and me. Tom got fired too." I felt a surge of triumph but kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that, Lisa, but maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's time to focus on rebuilding our marriage." She looked at me, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Do you really think so, Mark? Do you think we can still fix this?" I nodded, maintaining the charade. "I think we can try, but you need to understand the consequences of your actions. You need to see what your betrayal has done." Over the next few days, I watched as Lisa struggled to cope with losing her job. Her confidence was shattered, and she became a shadow of her former self, withdrawn and depressed. I continued to act supportive, relishing her suffering, but my revenge wasn't over yet. I needed to make sure Tom felt the full extent of my wrath. I found Tom's home address and decided to confront him one evening. He lived in a modest apartment across town, and it wasn't hard to find his door. When he opened it, his face turned pale at the sight of me. "Mark," he stammered. "What are you doing here? I didn't waste any time." I shoved him back into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. "You thought you could sleep with my wife and get away with it?" I growled. He backed away, fear in his eyes. "Listen, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Sorry?" I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You destroyed my marriage. You ruined my life. And now you're going to pay." I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "I lost my job because of you," he cried, desperation in his voice. "Isn't that enough?" "No," I whispered. "It's nowhere near enough." I beat him mercilessly, pouring out all my pent-up anger and frustration. When I was done, he was a bloody, whimpering mess on the floor. I stood over him, breathing heavily. "If you ever go near Lisa again," I spat, "I'll kill you." I left him there, satisfied with my revenge. As I drove home, I felt a dark satisfaction. Lisa and Tom had both paid for their betrayal, and I felt a twisted sense of justice. When I returned home, Lisa was sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me, a mixture of fear and hope in her gaze. "Mark, where have you been?" I shrugged, keeping my voice calm. "Just driving. Needed to clear my head." She nodded, biting her lip. "I've been thinking about what you said, about rebuilding our marriage. I want to try, Mark. I really do." I sat down next to her, taking her hand in mine. "Then let's start working on it, Lisa. Let's rebuild what we lost." We sat there, the house filled with tense, awkward silence. The path to reconciliation was uncertain, but I knew one thing: Lisa would never forget the consequences of her betrayal, and I would never let her forget. In the following weeks, we made a tentative attempt to mend our broken marriage. Despite the facade of reconciliation, my anger and distrust simmered beneath the surface. We began seeing a therapist, Dr. Collins, who specialized in couples dealing with infidelity. Each session was a painful excavation of our past, our resentments, and the betrayal that had torn us apart. Dr. Collins encouraged open and honest communication, forcing us to express our feelings without fear of judgment. Lisa tearfully confessed her loneliness, her frustration with my work habits, and how she felt neglected and unloved. In turn, I expressed my pain, my sense of betrayal, and the rage that consumed me from the moment I discovered her affair. Despite our efforts, the sessions often devolved into arguments. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Lisa's attempts to apologize and explain her actions only fueled my anger. Her words felt hollow, her remorse insincere. I couldn't forget the image of her and Tom in our living room, the sound of their laughter echoing in my mind. One evening, after an especially tense therapy session, We returned home in silence. The air was thick with tension, a suffocating presence we couldn't escape. I retreated to the guest room while Lisa went to our bedroom. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I realized with startling clarity this wasn't working. The trust was gone, replaced by a festering wound that refused to heal. The next morning I made a decision. I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a cycle of anger and resentment. I needed to move on, find some semblance of peace. It was time to end our marriage. I approached Lisa in the kitchen, my heart heavy but resolute. "Lisa, we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "What is it, Mark?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I think it's time for us to end this. We can't keep living like this. The trust is gone, and I don't see a way to rebuild it." Her face crumpled, and she looked away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mark, please. We can still try. We can keep going to therapy, keep working on it." I shook my head, my voice firm. "This isn't working, Lisa. We both know it. This isn't a marriage anymore, it's a prison. We're both unhappy, and it's only going to get worse." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I don't want to lose you. I love you, Mark. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I want to make it right. I loved you too," I said quietly, the past tense hanging heavily in the air. "But I can't forget what you did. Every time I look at you, I see the betrayal. It's tearing me apart." She reached out with a trembling hand, touching my arm. "Please, Mark, give me one more chance." I pulled my arm away, unable to bear her touch. "I'm sorry, Lisa. I've already contacted a lawyer. We're getting a divorce." Her sobs grew louder, but I steeled myself against the sound. I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by her tears, not when I knew this was the right decision for both of us. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and paperwork. I hired Marcia, a ruthless lawyer I had consulted earlier. She was efficient and unyielding, ensuring my interests were protected. Lisa, for her part, was devastated. She hired a lawyer too, but her heart wasn't in the fight. She seemed resigned to the inevitability of our divorce. We divided our assets, sold the house, and split the proceeds. The process was painful, a constant reminder of the life we had built together and the dreams that had crumbled. Friends and family were shocked, some taking my side, others Lisa's. It was a messy, emotional process, but I knew it was the only way forward. On the day we signed the final divorce papers, Lisa and I met in the lawyer's office. The atmosphere was somber, the weight of our failed marriage hanging between us. Marcia handed me the papers, her expression professional and detached. Lisa's lawyer did the same. As I signed my name, memories flooded back: our wedding day, our travels, quiet evenings spent together. All of it now reduced to a few signatures on a piece of paper. When it was Lisa's turn to sign, she hesitated, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. "Mark, are you sure about this? There's no going back after this." I nodded, my resolve firm. "I'm sure, Lisa. This is the right decision." She signed the papers, her hands shaking. When she finished, she looked at me one last time. "I hope you find happiness, Mark. I really do." I struggled to keep my emotions in check. "I hope you do too, Lisa." With that, we stood up and left the office, each going our separate ways. The divorce was final, and there was no turning back. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of our broken marriage was lifted, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. The future was uncertain, but it was mine, free from the chains of betrayal and distrust. The journey to healing and self-discovery was just beginning, and I was ready to face it head-on. It was time to rebuild my life, find peace and happiness on my own terms, and with each step I took, I knew I was moving closer to a future where I could finally be free from the shadows of the past. The days following the finalization of our divorce were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, freedom and loss. The chapter of my life with Lisa had ended, and it was time to turn the page and start anew. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown, far away from the suburbs where we had lived. It was modest but cozy, a blank slate for my new beginning. The first few weeks were tough. I would wake up in the middle of the night, disoriented and reaching for someone who was no longer there. The emptiness of the apartment echoed my loneliness, but I knew it was a necessary part of the healing process. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and staying late at the office. The routine was comforting, providing a sense of stability amidst the chaos. I also began reconnecting with old friends I had lost touch with over the years. They welcomed me with open arms, offering support and distraction from my thoughts. We went out for drinks, watched games, and reminisced about the past. Their presence reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there was a world beyond my failed marriage. Therapy became an essential part of my recovery. Dr. Ellis, a patient and understanding therapist, helped me navigate the labyrinth of my emotions. Our sessions were intense and often painful, forcing me to confront the anger, guilt, and sadness I had buried deep inside. Dr. Ellis helped me realize that while Lisa's betrayal was significant, there were many layers to the breakdown of our marriage. I had to acknowledge my own shortcomings, my failure to see her unhappiness, and my role in the erosion of our relationship. "You're doing well, Mark," Dr. Ellis said one day, his voice calm and reassuring. "It's important to acknowledge the pain, but just as important to forgive yourself. You're human, and humans make mistakes. The key is to learn from them and move forward." His words resonated with me. Forgiveness, both for Lisa and myself, was the only path to true healing. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, the anger began to subside, replaced by a cautious acceptance of the past. As the months went by, I began to rediscover myself. I took up photography, a hobby I had always loved but had neglected during my marriage. I spent weekends exploring the city, capturing moments of beauty and serenity through the lens of my camera. Each photograph was a testament to my journey, a visual diary of my path to recovery. I also joined a hiking group, eager to reconnect with nature and challenge myself physically. The hikes were exhausting but exhilarating, each step a metaphor for my progress. The fresh air and stunning landscapes provided a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. In the group, I made new friends, people who shared my love for the outdoors and understood the value of a fresh start. One of these new friends was Emma. She was vibrant and full of life, with a smile that could light up the darkest room. We hit it off immediately, our conversations flowing effortlessly as we hiked through forests and climbed mountains. Emma was also recovering from a broken relationship, and we found solace in each other's company. We shared our stories, our struggles, and our hopes for the future. The more time we spent together, the stronger our connection grew. It was different from what I had with Lisa, simpler, more genuine. Emma wasn't a replacement for Lisa. She was a new beginning, a chance to build something from scratch. I was cautious, taking things slowly, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of happiness. One evening, after a long hike, Emma and I sat by a lake, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The moment was perfect, a snapshot of serenity. Emma turned to me, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Mark, I've been thinking. We've both been through a lot and made great progress. I really enjoy spending time with you, and I think we could be good together." Her words caught me off guard but filled me with warmth. "I feel the same way, Emma. I think we should give ourselves a chance and see where this takes us." We exchanged quiet smiles, an unspoken promise of a new beginning hanging in the air. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. We were both broken, but together, we could start to heal. As the weeks and months passed, Emma and I grew closer. We supported each other through the ups and downs, celebrating small victories and comforting each other during tough times. Our relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the deception and betrayal I had experienced with Lisa. Life after Lisa was a journey of rediscovery and healing. I learned to forgive, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future with open arms. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer define me. They were a part of my story, a reminder of the strength and resilience I had found within myself. Looking back, I realized that the end of my marriage was not the end of my life. It was a painful chapter, but it led me to a place of growth and self-awareness. I faced my darkest fears, weathered the storm, and emerged stronger and wiser on the other side. Emma and I continued to build our life together, step by step. We traveled, explored new places, and created memories that were uniquely ours. Our love was a testament to the healing power of time and the resilience of the human spirit. In the end, I found happiness not in spite of my past, but because of it. The betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, all of it was part of my journey, shaping me into the person I had become. And as I looked towards the future, I did so with hope and a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace whatever life had in store.